start off this review by saying if you are thinking about getting an iPad Air, then now really is the time to jump on it. This is a fantastic upgrade over the previous model, and I've personally been really impressed by it. So much so, I've actually decided I'm going to move over from my M1 12.9-inch iPad Pro to this new Air so it can be my main iPad for the foreseeable future. And in this video, I'm going to tell you why. So if you do like iPad and aesthetic tech content, be sure to subscribe and let's get right into it. First off, let's explain the upgrades from the previous iPad Air from 2020. The main one here is the M1 chip, which not only gets you better performance, but it also means with any iPad Air you pick up now, you're going to get 8GB of RAM, which is double the previous Air and is a decent whack, especially for a tablet and especially for one running iPad OS, which rarely shows any sign of slow up anyway. You're also picking up an improved front-facing camera. The Air now gets the 12MP center stage enabled wide angle camera we've seen in pretty much all other iPads recently, which means your face can now be tracked while you're on a video call, or it can intelligently reframe itself if someone else comes into the shot. It's a really nice touch, and I'm glad Apple has made this a pretty consistent feature across the line. Another change is the USB-C port is now twice as fast at 10GB/s, which is now in line with the iPad Pros. You've now got access to 5G if you go for the cellular models, and of course Apple pushed out a bunch of new colorways, which I initially thought were the same as the last model of iPad Air, but they're actually all different. I had to go for this purple one because it just matches everything I'm doing here on the channel at the moment, and I really love it. So that's the story of the specs. It's a really nice bump overall, and I think getting an M1 in there rather than the A15 chip that the iPad mini and the iPhone 13s have was a really nice surprise. With all those amazing new specs aside, there is something I wanted to address in this video though. It's the build quality of this generation of iPad Air, and honestly this is a tough one for me to comment on because my Air has been totally fine, but I would feel remiss not to at least talk about it. There's been a wide number of reports of people experiencing creaking noises on the new iPad when you apply some pressure to it, and others have also mentioned that the entire device feels a little bit thinner and more flexible than last year. Now, luckily I have both iPad Air models from last year and this year, so I can compare them directly, and what I can say is the new Air is certainly a little thinner, but as for creaks and that more flexible feeling people were talking about, I don't see it here on mine at all. This feels just as sturdy as my iPad Air from 2020, and even after applying a little more flex and pressure to it than I normally would, I haven't heard or felt anything. Look, I can only talk from experience and not for all the models of the new Air, so keep that in mind, but mine appears to be just fine, and personally I wouldn't let it put me off grabbing one of these new iPad Airs. Anyway, I've been using this new iPad Air for about 3 weeks now, and here's the main thing I've noticed. It no longer feels like a step down from the Pro models, and that's a really nice feeling to have. The only way I can really sum up that sense is down to its responsiveness. I think the M1 chip and that 8GB of RAM have worked wonders for it, and everything just snaps and glides on here like the Pro models do. Not that the Air from 2020 was a slouch, because it's not at all and it's still not, but there's certainly a difference here. Apps open with ease, the system floats around wonderfully, and switching between heavy workloads just feels easy. That responsiveness also translates to the Apple Pencil experience, which again on here just feels that bit better than the previous model. Drawing, writing notes, or just navigating the system is an excellent experience here, and I think you'd be really hard pushed to find any problems. Another thing I've slowly realized while using this new Air is I've been way too harsh on the Magic Keyboard. Historically, I don't really like using a keyboard on an iPad. For me, it's always been a tablet first device, and an attached keyboard just confused my intentions whenever I picked it up to work on it. But recently I can't stop using it on the new iPad Air, and I think the sizing is fantastic. It makes it a really nice place to sit and type things up, and it's just small enough to take with me anywhere. And I'm a little bit annoyed at myself for disregarding it for this long, and maybe it shows a really shallow part of my brain, but this white colorway combined with the new purple of the iPad might have had something to do with it. I've actually enjoyed using it so much I've even christened it with one of my favourite stickers from Pyhem Studio. My favourite part about this entire experience though has been the size. For the last year or so I've pretty much been using the iPad Pro 12.9 inch, which with its ProMotion Mini LED display has been an utter joy to use, but going back to this 11-inch size has made me realise that this is kind of the de facto fit for iPads. Every app, experience and accessory just feels right on here, and the extra portability has made me take it with me way more often than not. Let's talk about gaming quickly too. Playing games on the iPad has been something I've enjoyed for quite a while now, and this new Air is just another great example of how good an iPad can be for gaming to get your fix. Games run on here unsurprisingly just like they do on the M1 iPad Pro models. They're quick to load, look great, and more often than not, they run at a really consistent high frame rate. I've personally been playing a lot of Final Fantasy VII First Soldier, which is an interesting take on the Battle Royale theme, and it looks really fantastic on the Air. Gameplay is nice and smooth for the most part, even when things get chaotic. Every other game I've tried also works really well, and of course if you connect a controller to it to play, like I often do, you can get a really console-like experience on here. Again, I would never say get this over a dedicated portable console like a Nintendo Switch, but iPads can game, and this new Air is a great place to do it. So the main difference now between the Air and the Pro models is pretty much that ProMotion screen, which in day-to-day use, and especially with the Apple Pencil, always felt much nicer on the Pro models. And while that still holds true to a certain point, because it does, it's way less noticeable on here. And the Air models are perfectly good for all types of digital art and note-taking, and for someone like me, that's kind of all I really need from an iPad. And I've got to admit, I'm in a strange and lucky situation. I review iPads and look at all of the models, so I have access to most of them and usually all at the same time, but I always try and imagine that I don't and think about where I would put my money if I didn't have access like I do. And honestly, right now at least, if you took all of my iPads away from me, I think this new Air is where I put my money. It's doing everything I need from an iPad, and I could easily live with this device rather than pushing up to the Pro models. It's a really excellent offering, and that's why I want to switch. I want to really use this iPad Air model because for me, I think it's really doing everything I need. It's also worth keeping in mind if the Air model is this good this year, then I think it will be really exciting to see where the iPad Pro goes to make itself stand out even more. Perhaps an M2 chip is on the cards, or maybe even MagSafe compatibility. Who knows, but it'll be interesting to see where Apple takes it. Overall, there's not much to dislike here, but if there is one thing I still have trouble with, it's Apple's pricing structure for iPads. I've talked about this before, but if you buy the new Air in the 256GB variant, which I think most people should, then the difference between that and the base model Pro is a mere £30. And that Pro model does have a bit less storage at 128GB, but it does have that ProMotion display, better speakers, better cameras, a LiDAR sensor, so there's actually quite a big upgrade in there. I honestly wish the iPad Air model started at 128GB of storage, because then it would be such an easy recommendation to make. But when they're this close, especially with the 256GB model, then the only advice you should really listen to is your own. You'll need to try and decide if you need those pro level features or not, and then buy based off that. So that pretty much rounds up this iPad Air review. It's a really great upgrade over the previous generation, and I think anyone picking one up won't be disappointed. If you did grab one, then let me know what model you went for in the comments below, and if you've had any of those issues with the creaking body like I mentioned. Anyway, pop a like on the way out, that'd be massive, and I will see you all in the next one.